So once you scan the QR code, you'll see a question on your screen which says, what is the one word that comes to your mind when you hear or when you read the word exam? And I'm getting a few answers. Okay. I'm going to also paste the link in the chat for anyone who wants to take it from there. That's fine. Okay, so we have some answers here: hard, nervous, test, anxiety, failure. Okay, fear, pass. Hungry, I feel you, whoever this is, been there. Okay, so anxiety is the biggest word. And then we have fear, which takes up, second. Don't want to write again. Okay, okay. What a challenge. Okay. These are good answers. Guys, it would be good if, all of us participate. So it will help even, Dr. Daniela as well to, answer your queries if we know what exactly are we facing. Why did I not say? Why did I not study the regret? Yes. What a hopelessness. Okay. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's just that I've been through this, so I understand where you're coming from. Okay, challenging, nervous. Okay, so as we can see, the biggest term that everybody, or is used most is anxiety, okay, and fear or failure. Okay, and I think that's where anxiety stems from, the idea that, what if I pass? Okay, what is the answer? I love these answers. I'm going to save them because this is really good. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, this is just one word. I want you to, if you, let me share my screen. I want you to share, how does exam anxiety affect you on your exam day? Okay, before you start, I'll just share my story. Maybe that can give you help to give you an idea. I remember when I was doing AFM exam, I went into the exam, and if you have been taught by Waleed, you would know that he always says, don't press the panic button, okay? And I went in the exam and I saw this question on valuation, and I did exactly the opposite of what he told me. That is, I pressed the panic button and I forgot everything. I forgot what valuation even meant. I forgot NPV. I forgot, risk-adjusted WACC. Everything just went out of my head. And I just sat there for 15 minutes not writing, and everybody's writing. And when I saw them, it freaked me out even more. Okay. And I was just like, I'm failing this exam. But then, his words came to me and they were like, don't press the panic button, don't press the panic button. If you do, get out of it. So I excused myself. I went to the washroom for 10 minutes extra, just sat there, calming myself down, breathing, and just like, okay, I got this. I know this. I know this. I came out, okay, and, I got myself together. But I wasted a good 30 minutes because of that. So, and I feel like a lot of people go through that. So a lot of people are saying that, oh, it helps you. That is good. Anxiety helps you. That's great. Memory loss, I feel you. Made me forget everything I did not study. Start sweating, remember nothing. Okay, I think the most common effect that you usually see is that you forget that, okay, did I study this? Nervousness and memory loss. Any other effects do we see? Okay, you saw anxious right now. I'm a clumsy dropper, can't do multitasking since birth. Okay, imagine banging yourself against, the tables multiple times before you reach your table. So I know how that is. You are, what else do we have? Okay, anybody else would like to share anything? Will I pass? Time is running out. Okay, so yes, it impacts us in a lot of times. It impacts us in a bad way because it puts us in a hole where we feel like, we don't know what we're doing, where we feel like, okay, I don't know what to do. People are writing. What are they writing? I want to write as well, but I don't know what to write. I'm in trouble. So it's good that we have Dr. Daniela here, and she's gonna take us through, how anxiety affects us and what we can do to overcome that. Because like I said, that if Waleed's weren't running in my head telling me to get out of that panic hole, I'm sure I would haven't done anything in that entire exam. Okay, so there are ways in terms of managing and calming yourself down, which doctor will kindly help us with. So I will pass it on to you. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Dr. Daniela, is that okay?
Thank you. Yes, it is.
And yes, and I would leave up to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dr. Daniela Salazar, and I am a clinical psychologist working at the Lighthouse Arabia. For those that don't know what the Lighthouse Arabia is, it is a wellness and mental health clinic in Dubai, in Jumeirah area. And we have a team of about 30 different clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists that work with prenatal stages all the way to family therapy. So I am one of the clinicians that works largely with anxiety disorders and mood disorders. And so I actually get a lot of clients struggling with test anxiety in my everyday practice. So when I was told if I would be interested in talking about test anxiety, I actually got really happy to be giving information so that a lot of you just have the tools and have the ability to understand what is anxiety trying to tell us and how can we cope with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I won't be able to see your questions until the end of my talk, but I want to leave some room for questions as I know maybe some doubts or some things might come up. So I want to be able to give all of you the space to ask away. I'm also going to give you all my email. You can personally write me, whenever you want. I answer within 24 hours. So I'm very accessible to all of you if you want extra guidance or extra support in anything around test anxiety or mood disorders or anxiety disorders in general. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I think all of you, if you can hear me and see me okay, can you just give me a raise of hands in your screen?
Yes, I can see and hear you. Everybody's good.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about test anxiety. And before I go in, I'll just do a little bit of an introduction here of what anxiety is. Anxiety disorders are an umbrella term. Within anxiety disorders, we have different types like phobias, like performance anxiety, which is where test anxiety comes in, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, separation anxiety, and so on and so forth. We have many types of anxiety. So because all of anxiety has the same or similar psychological, emotional, physical symptoms, regardless of the type of anxiety, the approach tends to be quite similar. So today I will be focusing on the most effective approach when treating anxiety, which is under the cognitive behavioral therapeutic model. In psychology, we have different ways of analyzing a problem or an issue with different psychological approaches. However, the one that has had most evidence-based research has been cognitive behavioral therapy, or short for CBT. Now, in the CBT model, we believe that the way you think affects the way you feel and the way you act. And therefore, we need to intervene in the way we think, in the way we feel, and the way we act to create a change. All of these three things are going to be interconnected. And so we're going to be at the end of the talk today, we're going to be then giving you tips on how to change each and every part of this model to be able to cope with your anxiety. Everything that we will be discussing today will be used in any other anxiety disorder as well. So I want us to feel free to use this whenever anxiety pops up in different settings, not only for test anxiety. So our agenda of today, we're going to really deep dive into what is test anxiety. How do we develop test anxiety? Where does it come from? What are some of the steps to manage this test anxiety coming from the cognitive behavioral model that I described? What are some of the thinking traps? Like I said, it's the thoughts, the feelings, the behavior. So what are the thinking traps that we fall into that magnify this anxiety and keep us in this anxiety cycle? And then I'm going to give you guys some taking tips and study tips for you to use. So you're going to reduce the amount of anxiety you're going to be feeling towards exams. Now, we're going to be faced with exams for, the rest of our academic life, but we're going to be facing other sort of challenges that are going to be similar to exams the rest of our lives, whether it's a new member in our family, whether it's a driving exam, whether it's, an admissions exam for postgrad, undergrad, whatever it might be, whether it's a new job application, whether it's performance for colleagues. So all of these things that we're going to be discussing will be very useful. So some of the symptoms that we talked about earlier before I started talking were some of the feelings of going blank, becoming frustrated, thinking you can't do this, labeling yourself as stupid, dumb, not capable of anything. Maybe we feel like the space is closing in on us. We feel our heart racing. We feel like we don't have enough oxygen in our bodies to feel loose and to be able to concentrate. Maybe we feel like we know the answers after we've handed in the test, and we feel very down and frustrated about knowing the answers after the fact. And then we feel like we score so much lower on these exams than we do on the homeworks or the everyday task, and we don't know why. So when we're performing, we feel distracted, we get, a fly goes by and we're analyzing the fly or the pencil or the eraser or the coffee mug. We're feeling overwhelmed, stretched like no other. We feel like we're just missing the important things. We are always focusing on how bad the outcome is going to be and how this is going to impact your future. So how do we develop test anxiety? And this is a big question that I get asked a lot. Why is it that I have this and some other people do not? So basically, there are two avenues. So before I start that, let me just explain what test anxiety is before I go into the avenue. So we talked about the racing thoughts. We talked about the inability to concentrate. We talked about the physical symptoms of not having a lot of breath, tense muscles, and all of these things make a lot of noise in our minds. And so we even start maybe anticipating tests a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance. So we're like anxious half the month, right? Where we can't eat, we can't sleep, we can't socialize, we get moody, we start snapping at our family members. And all of this starts boiling up days or even weeks before we have a test. So I want us to take a look at this slide really quickly and identify ourselves with some of these physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, behavioral symptoms, cognitive symptoms that we might have when it comes to test anxiety. A lot of the times we even avoid going to class. We might engage in substance abuse or avoidance, smoking, drinking. We might be even taking some sleeping medicine to be able to sleep because the anxiety is getting so high. We are feeling constantly disappointed, anger, dry mouth, physical symptoms like dry mouth, lightheadedness, tense muscles, upset stomachs, sweating, and all of these things are really uncomfortable. So because all of this is very uncomfortable, our natural instinct is going to be avoidance. And it can be either cognitive avoidance by distracting yourself and doing something else that's not important, also known as procrastination, or it might be that you are distracting your emotions by doing something more healthy, like exercising or cooking, and you might think, oh, what's wrong with cooking? What's wrong with exercising? But if the reason why we're engaging in these activities is to avoid the feeling of anxiety, then it becomes a problem. Or we become addicted or to substance abuse or other forms of substances like shopping, which are called process addictions, or smoking or gaming or cell phone use. And all of these things become ways of numbing away the discomfort feelings of anxiety. Now we know that in anxiety, we have different ways in which we can react towards it. It's not only avoidance, we also have freeze mode, which is where we don't know what's going on. We go blank, we lose touch with reality, and we almost have out of body experiences. Or we start engaging in rage, irritability, confrontation, which is the fight mode. So it's fight, freeze mode, or flight mode. And those are the typical ways in which we react to anxiety or any sort of situation of danger, stress reactions or anxiety. So I want us to take a time, just a few seconds, to think about which one am I? Am I the avoider? Am I the freeze mode, or am I the fight mode? Where do I identify myself most with? And this is very normal, guys. We all have this fight, freeze, or flight response, but it's really important to understand which one is my go-to, so I start understanding the symptoms and the triggers for this anxiety. For many of you, it doesn't only end in test anxiety. We can also feel anxious in many other settings, and that identifying your modality of anxiety management will help. So how does this get developed? So some of you might say, I coasted by school. I never seemed to have a problem until I hit college or until I'm in a higher education. And I'm thinking, why am I all of a sudden struggling? I coasted by school. Nothing seemed to be a problem. And now I'm having all of these issues. I'm having trouble concentrating. I'm having trouble, turning things in. I'm procrastinating. And what we know is that poor performance then starts leading to more test anxiety. Then we start associating our poor performance with our character. What does this mean about me? What type of person am I if I do low in tests now? And before I was doing so well, I might have a problem. Something's wrong with my mind. And so all of these thoughts start exacerbating the symptoms of anxiety. Now, that means we actually have a lack of skills in managing these emotions. So we need to develop relaxation skills, cognitive diffusion skills, which are ways to distance ourselves from our thoughts. We need to learn how to relate to our anxiety differently. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. However, there might be another reason why you develop test anxiety, and that is because we don't have the skills. We don't have the study habits. We don't know a lot of the topics that we're meant to be delivering results on. And so we need to build up the academic skills. We might have maybe passed a few years here and there in school without knowing things, but we come to a time and place where, these skills or these academic concepts are needed, and we didn't learn it with time, or we didn't ask for help on time. So this is where we need to then boost up our academic skills, learn how to study better, and actually maybe get some extra tutoring or ask for help from a teacher or from a parent. Or we might need to develop some time management skills to cram or to study with time your exams, where you are feeling a little bit more at ease and not as stretched. So if I want to describe the cognitive behavioral model, we know that there's a situation. In this case, it will be an exam. There will be a thought that will most likely be a negative thought associated to that situation. And then that thought is going to be linked with a negative feeling like fear or anxiousness, right? However, that same situation can have a healthy thought, which will then lead to a healthy feeling. So at the end of the day, it is not the situation that we need to change. It is the way we think about the situation that needs to change. The exam in itself is not the danger. It's not actually life-threatening. It is the way we relate to the exam that's going to be either decreasing or increasing our anxiety or our distressing feelings. So steps to manage our anxiety. The first thing we want to say is we need to start developing realistic thinking. Now, realistic thinking is not about, picturing things in rose-colored glasses. It is about analyzing the good, the bad, and the neutral. So let's pay attention to our inner language, our self-talk. Language is our biggest best friend. It's a way we connect, the way we, communicate with our family members, the way we communicate with ourselves through our thoughts. But at the same time, it is our worst enemy. The way we frame our thoughts, the way we talk, has a lot of impact in the way that we feel. We all have our way of thinking about things, which really play a big effect in the way that we feel in the everyday life. So we're going to be talking about big thinking mistakes that we make. And I hope that you are able to either take some notes or see the recording again, so you can think about whether some of these thinking traps are some of the thoughts that are increasing your test anxiety. So then we want to identify, okay, what am I thinking right now? What is the thought that's going on in my head? I'm thinking something because I'm feeling anxious. Now, for some of you, you might be able to identify the thought before the actual physical feeling, and that's okay. For other people, you might identify your physical feelings before your thought, and that's okay as well. Whatever comes first at the end of the day is reflection. What am I thinking right now? What is actually making me feel anxious? Is it the thought that I won't do well? Is it the thought that I won't graduate? Is it the thought that other people are looking at me? Is it the thought that I'm turning in my test later than everyone else? Is it the thought that I was late to class and I'm scared that this is going to play against me? What is actually making you feel anxious? What is my worst case scenario that I'm creating in my mind? And what are these bad things that I expect to happen? What are the consequences of these bad things? So you're actually building awareness. Through awareness, we can go to control. And then we're going to be challenging these thoughts, right? So according to the CBT model, you are your own best friend or your own worst enemy. So you recognize that there is a negative either sensation, which leads to a negative thought. You're curious about that negative thought, and then you're going to be challenging that negative thought. And this might actually take 5 minutes because our mind works really fast. So you don't need to take 20 minutes about this. This is really quickly. So I want us to then challenge our negative thoughts. Thinking that something might happen doesn't mean it will happen. Our thoughts are just thoughts, by the way. We have about 20,000 thoughts in 1 hour, that most of them are on a subconscious level. So if you can imagine that 20,000 thoughts are going through your mind in a given hour, most of them you're letting go. You're not actually grabbing onto them as tightly as you are to some others. So why is that? Is the way that you're letting others go, in that same way you can let these go. So the premise here is thoughts are not facts. They're just thoughts. They're just emotions. We fluctuate emotionally through the day, and that's normal. It does not mean that you're bipolar. It doesn't mean that you have a mental illness. It just means you're human to have different sort of emotions during the day, as well as different types of thoughts during the day. So recognizing that a thought does not need an action is a really important thing. A lot of the times when we are feeling anxious, we are interpreting that thought as life-threatening, right? So I want us to think about maybe that annoying alarm in school that goes off, the fire alarm, or the fire alarm that goes in your building, and you just hear it. And after a while, you realize, I know what that alarm is. That alarm is just, testing something, or someone's cooking and the fire alarm went off. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is danger. You learned that. But at the beginning, your initial response was to worry, was to react, was to call the police, was to go down in your pajamas and wait outside until you're able to come in. And you start realizing, wait a minute, that alarm can go off many times, but it doesn't need an action. So that's exactly what we're going to be learning in this talk, hopefully, that not every thought needs an action. Not every anxious thought will require me to avoid or to fight or to freeze. So going over the different thinking traps, and by the way, there are many of these that you can find in Google. Just type cognitive thinking traps and you'll find a list of about 12. I'm going to name some here that are really relevant to test anxiety. The first one is fortune telling. We believe that we can predict things, that how they're going to turn out, right? We believe we have a fortune telling machine and we just know that the exam is going to turn out really bad and that you're going to mess up and that you're never going to pass the year. Now, this thinking trap, again, is going to cause distressing emotions to come up because our mind and our bodies are connected. So the way that we think is going to affect that we are feeling in our body, which will then be a name of an emotion like anxiety, frustration, anger. Black and white thinking. For those that are quite perfectionists, this is a very typical one, right? We only look at situations in terms of extremes, whether it's I did wonderfully or I did horribly. I'm a success or I'm a failure, right? So if you don't get above, let's say 90 over 100, then you're a complete failure. Even though in real life, getting an 80 over 100 is still a good grade, for anyone else, for you, it's only 90 over 100. So these black and white thinking styles are also exacerbating your anxiety. Mind reading. We believe that we know what others are thinking. So that might be, oh, I failed this math test. My whole class will make fun of me or will think I'm stupid. Or my teacher will feel disappointed if I don't do well on my test. So we are assuming we know how others think and feel. And that's a huge mistake that we make in many other settings. Again, not just in test anxiety, where we are predicting what other people are thinking and feeling. And the truth is that we're only responsible for the way that we think, we feel, and we act. We're not responsible for the way other people feel, think, and act. And so knowing that will allow you to take distance from mind reading. Overgeneralization. We always talk in always or never terms, right? So we overgeneralize. I always do bad in exams. This never goes well. I always fail. So this type of thinking isn't helpful because it doesn't take into consideration all the other times where it wasn't like that. You know, think about a time where your parents or your partner or a colleague tells you things where they're overgeneralizing. You would probably get upset. If your partner says something like, you're always so selfish, or your mom saying you're always so irresponsible, that hurts because they're not taking into account the other many situations where you were not acting irresponsibly or you were not acting selfishly. So overgeneralizations will always increment anxiety. Labeling. Now we're all really good at judging others and judging ourselves. So we use really harsh words about ourselves when we're feeling distressed. I'm dumb, I'm a loser, I'm a failure. And a lot of these labels only increment, again, the anxiety that we feel physically and therefore allow us to go blank in a test. Overestimating danger, right? So this is the belief that something that is unlikely to happen is actually around the corner and it's going to happen, right? So I'm going crazy, I'm dying. We might feel these physical symptoms so heavily that we truly believe that we're dying and we truly believe that we're going crazy or that you're going to throw up, right? And we're experimenting the situation as extreme danger. And of course, you can imagine if that feeds into other anxiety provoking thoughts, you're going to go on this vicious cycle of down spiral anxiety where your physical symptoms will only worsen. Filtering, that only happens when we are focusing on the bad things, right? We see the cup half full. We don't see the cup in any other way, right? It's just, half empty. We don't see the half full. So this prevents us from seeing the positive aspects, right? So if someone's giving us constructive criticism, we might stay with only the phrase that we did not like. And we assume that is the way that other person is portraying us or thinking about us. So if you got a bad mark on a test because you left 3 questions blank, right? Even though you answered all the other questions, then you believe that you're going to do horribly on the test. but you answered all these other questions and you didn't consider those except the 3 that you left unanswered. So all these thinking traps that I'm mentioning, again, you can see how it can increment the feelings of anxiety and the physical symptoms that are going to make you then automatically go to avoidance, freezing, or fighting mode. Catastrophizing, right? Imagining the worst possible scenario and always thinking that that worst possible scenario is the only option. Should statements. Now, this is a big one for perfectionists as well, right? Using things like should, must, have tos. I should stop worrying about this. I can't make any mistakes. I have to get everything done. All these should and must statements only put more pressure on yourself, overload your plate, and don't allow you to see the other bits of the situation that could benefit you and reduce your anxiety. So what to do, right? So we've analyzed the thinking traps. We've gone over some of the symptoms of test anxiety. We know why it happens. So what can I do moving forward? So questions, and maybe you want to take a screenshot of this slide. It might be a useful idea. How do I challenge these thoughts? So number 1, am I falling into a thinking trap from the ones that we've discussed? Probably yes. Am I basing my judgment on feelings or on facts? Most likely you would be basing your judgment on feelings, not on facts. And therefore, again, feelings come and go. They're not reliable. We have different feelings throughout a day. So relying your anxiety on how you feel in that given moment is actually quite distressing, and it's not very objective. Am I 100% sure I will fail? And why? Why am I 100% sure? What is the worst thing that can happen right now? And if the worst thing did happen, how could I cope with it? Will it matter in a month? Will it matter in a year? Will it matter in 3 years? Go longer in life. Do not stay in the same week or the same day. Go longer. Will this be important in a week? Will this be important in a month? Will this be important in a year? Will people talk about this in a month? Will people talk about this in a year? Probably not. So you are destructing all of these anxiety-provoking thoughts with rational thinking, where you're not just, again, looking at life through rose-colored glasses, but you're saying, I'm being a bit more realistic with what I have right now in the present moment. Something I always recommend for those that are really, truly wanting to work on your test anxiety. Working on your test anxiety means you need to track your test anxiety, right? We can't just talk about test anxiety and want the test anxiety to be gone without actually tracking it and writing down the different thoughts that come up when it happens. And you're going to start seeing a trend of the different thinking traps that you fall into. And then you're going to work on creating realistic thoughts that you can have in that given situation. And then you're learning a new way of coping with anxiety. Now, if you, depending on your age, you've been living with these sort of anxious thoughts your whole life, and we have the mindset of always looking out for danger, because looking out for danger makes us survive longer. If we're analyzing it from an evolutionary perspective, we're always needing to be looking out for ways we don't fit in, ways we might be in danger, ways we might not pass an exam, because that way we're going to keep on living. We're going to be watching out for things that are going to be quite dangerous later on. The truth is that we don't have those life-threatening situations as often anymore. We're not chased by tigers. We don't have natural disasters every day. We're not getting, chased by a robber or kidnapped, right? We're dealing with exams. We're dealing with meeting a new person. We might be meeting with performing. And yet we treat it like it was a life or death situation. And then our thoughts and our bodies react as if we were in a life or death situation. And here's a fun fact for you. We are the only animals in the world that have anxiety. Any other animal has fear. And you can be in the Maldives, relaxing by the beach, and with just thinking about a situation that is distressing, you can physically feel as if you were there, as if you were present in that distressing situation. And that ability is only done through our thinking, through our language. That's why the way you think about yourself matters. That's why knowing about these thinking traps is so important. That's why keeping track of your thinking traps is even more important. So the situation here is my final exam is tomorrow. So your worries is you're not good in math and you're going to fail and you won't pass the class. So what is a more realistic thought after you've analyzed the facts, not the feelings? So facts, you will study tonight, you will try your best tomorrow. You don't know for sure if you're going to fail. Maybe you're a 75% sure, but not 100% sure. You passed the last few tests. You've studied hard, you've done well on the homework. You try to find realistic things that will then compensate your anxiety provoking thought. The next way that we can cope with our test anxiety is having positive affirmations. So I've talked about challenging your thoughts, and now we're going to be talking about coping statements. What is a phrase that you can say to yourself before an exam? So if I get anxious, I will be trying calm breathing. I just need to do my best. People can't actually tell when I'm anxious. That's a really good one when we're performing in front of other people. This has happened to me before and I know how to handle it, or it's not the end of the world. I've passed through exams in the past. I can pass this one. My anxiety won't last forever. Some of these statements are helpful just to say as a mantra when you're about to take an exam. And of course, positive statements, right? How can you encourage yourself? How can you be your own best friend, right? We're our worst enemy and we're best friends to other people. So how can you be your own compassionate friend, your own best friend? So I know everyone experiences anxiety. This is not something that I'm only the one struggling with. I'm not a loser if I struggle with a test. I can get help. I know I can do this. I'm strong enough to do this test. I will do this test. A lot of my clients have these positive statements in their phone. They have alarms that go off that read the positive statements. So you can find your own way in which you can work best. And of course, we want to have an alternative balance statements, right? We can't just, again, think positively all the time. So you might be realistic about it. There might be a chance I'm going to fail or I'm not going to pass the math test, but not passing the math test does not mean I'm going to fail the entire class, or it doesn't mean I'm a failure. Or even if I don't pass this test, it doesn't mean I won't ever graduate from high school, right? So you're saying there might be a chance I'm going to fail because I didn't study hard, because I didn't organize my time, because I didn't sleep well. Fair enough. But how is this going to, again, impact me in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 6 months' time? So that is the cognitive bit. Now remember, the way we think affects the way we feel and the way our body feels, and then the way the behaviors. So that the thinking traps and the positive statements and the balanced thinking is how to calm our thoughts down. Now let's talk about our sensations, our physical sensations and our feelings. How do we calm those down? And the only way we can do that is returning to our body. So a good exercise is called focal breathing or ocean breathing or deep breathing, where you're really taking deep breaths. What we know about anxiety is that our breathing becomes extremely superficial and we're not actually putting oxygen in all of our body parts. So we need to really exhale and put all the air in our lungs, right? And we inhale through our nose. We might hold the air for a couple of seconds and then we let go of the air really slowly. And a lot of the times counting also helps because it distracts you from the actual tasks that you're doing and it makes you think clearly. So you're counting to 8 or to 5, you're holding 5, you're letting go to 5, or inhaling 8, holding for 8, letting go for 8. Whatever you do it at a paced time. You're not rushing, you're counting, you're really focusing on how the breath or the air comes in your nose and out of your mouth. Grounding techniques are also really important. It's not there in the presentation, but I want to say using our senses is useful. So you might be smelling a candle, smelling your hands if you put something, a cream or hand sanitizer, and you're focusing on that smell. You're focusing on a sound, you're focusing on things you can see, you're focusing on things you can touch, you're focusing on something you can taste. You're using your senses to ground your body into the present moment. So here are some general test taking tips that are going to be useful. Number one, do not arrive late to a test. So try your hardest to get to the test a little bit earlier than expected, so you're not rushing to your desk. Be comfortable, right? So you're going to be dressing also in comfortable clothes or in your uniform. Make sure you're wearing comfortable shoes, bring all your supplies and a watch. You're going to be able to budget your time, and I'm going to tell you how by answering the hardest questions first. Don't just start from the beginning. I will always say start with the hardest question first, or the questions that have the biggest amount of points, and then you go to the other ones. Read the directions clearly. Do not skip the directions, because a lot of times we miss essential information. Do not spend a lot of time in one question. You don't know it, you skip to the next, and then you come back to it, you circle it, and you skip to the next one. Before you begin, I am going to start with explaining what a mind dump is. A lot of us study with notes or books, right? And before we get started, I want you to write down in the corner of the test important information you just don't want to forget. It might be a math formula, it might be a date, it might be an acronym of some sort. So you do a mind dump on your test, right? That's the first thing. You put down all your information you want to write on your test. Then you look at the test to see which questions are the ones that seem a bit more complicated or that have more points, so that you can calculate how much time you're going to be spending on each of these questions. Right? You are not going to rush yourself. Pace yourself. Read the question and look at keywords, and if you can, highlight those keywords. Use a pen or a highlighter if you can, and make sure that when you're writing, you're not writing cursive, you're not writing quickly. Make sure that your handwriting is quite legible. Okay, next thing, you're reading a complicated question, reread it and try to say the question in your mind in your own words. Explain to yourself how you understand this question before you actually answer it. Right? Make sure that you leave a little bit of time to review your test. A lot of us rush to just hand the test over because we see our colleagues or our peers handing their test over. Try not to do that. So you review the test before you hand it in. And then, of course, you go back to the difficult questions, right? If you need to, circle words and difficult questions. I've said that before. Do not skip any question at the end of the test. Always go back, and if you don't know it, you just do a smart guess, right? If it's multiple choice, it's better. If it's not, just write information down that you know, right? Because at the end of the day, your doubts are so high and your anxiety are making you doubt so much that it's better that you answer something than not answering at all. So you give it a try. And then study tips, okay? I'm sure most of you know this, but I'm just going to reassure you that this is the way that you need to study. Do not cram for an exam. It is so important to allocate enough time before the exam. You do not want to study one day before the exam, study a few days before, right? The next thing is do not stay up late studying, because you're not going to get enough sleep, which is going to get you tired and grumpy, and you won't have time to wake up with time, and you're going to be rushing for your test. You need sleep. If anything, wake up early the next day, but do not stay up. I know some of you might say I'm a night owl, but there is no such thing as having the right attention spans at night, and that's proven. We are more alert from 6 a.m. in the morning to 12 noon. We are not alert after that. We're usually not alert after 45 minutes. That's why usually our sessions are 45 minutes of any type, because we get distracted. So we do not want to get distracted with other classmates that generate stress. Emotions are contagious. So if you are hanging out with an anxious peer or a friend, try not to hang out with that person a few days before the test, because most likely their anxiety is going to be passed on to you. And you get to put those firm boundaries with others. You get to say, guys, sorry, I'm feeling anxious myself. I need some time alone. And your friends will respect that. Try not to study with someone else that's also feeling anxious. Try to study with someone that is going to pump you up, that's going to give you assurance that you're going to feel relieved with. All right. General study tips that you might want to use. Make sure that you go to class right after the test. Why is that important? A lot of times we go to the bathroom, we start ruminating, we start thinking about how negatively we did on the test. So make sure that you go to your class before the test and after the test. You go to the next class. You don't sit and think about how you did and talk to other people and compare your answers, because when you start comparing your answers after you finish the test, that is going to be really frustrating. You're going to start doubting what you answered. You're going to be, feeling anxious after the fact that you took a test. And you can imagine how then anxiety is going to be prolonged until you get your exam results. And that's not going to help us. That's going to increase the probability of getting gastritis. That's going to increase the probability of actually developing an anxiety disorder, panic attacks. So we really want to be careful about how we're managing our time before and after. Review notes, homeworks, old tests, textbook, make sure that you have different ways of studying and getting your information before a test. Things that are basic, guys. Eat something. Do not go on an empty stomach. Make sure that you have water next to you. Cold water is also really useful in test anxiety management. What it does, it tips your body temperature. So make sure that you're having something really, really cold to drink next to you if you're able to. Go to the bathroom before walking into the exam room. A lot of us get an upset stomach, so it's really important to go to the bathroom if you need to. Wash your face with cold water. Anything that is cold before an exam or during an exam, it's important. So if you have a cold water bottle, you can put the cold water bottle in your neck, and that's going to tip your body temperature down. And it's also going to help you deal with your test anxiety. Of course, when you're studying, we want to distract anything. So cell phone use, please put it on airplane mode. Keep the phone out of the room if needed. Consider putting a do not disturb sign in your room. Try not to have as many tabs open in your computer. Make sure that you're letting people know when your study times are so they're not disrupting you and coming into the room. The room needs to be cool. When we're having a warm space, we get a lot sleepier and we get demotivated and we start just getting more distracted. So the cooler the room, the more concentrated we feel. So make sure you're wearing a little jacket or a little blanket on top, but the room needs to be cool. Make sure you're having the right light, a comfortable chair. We don't want to be in bed while we're studying, right? We don't want to be, in the couch laying while watching Netflix while we're studying. That's not going to be helpful. It needs to be a comfortable enough position, but not too comfortable for you to fall asleep. And remember, the attitude that you have is important. So you're going to have a good attitude. I'm getting this done. And then after I'm getting this done, I'm going to treat myself with a hot bath or with a phone call with a friend or with a sports day. You're going to treat yourself to something after studying. Make sure that you do that. You take active brain breaks as well. Every 45 minutes, stand up, get a bite to eat, talk to your mom for 5 minutes, come back, continue studying. Make sure that you're taking those brain breaks because your brain's not going to be able to take on all the information for 3 hours straight, right? So make sure that you're also just allowing that downtime. It's useful sometimes to create self-tests where you are, you might think about questions that might be on the test, or you might talk to friends and give them questions that you think that might be on the test, and you help each other out by creating your own test questions. Sometimes we don't have time to do that, but sometimes we do. So that's something I also recommend. So here I'm really open, guys, to answer your questions, to hear you guys out. I really wanted to make sure that I am going over the three main things, which is number one, the way you think, the thinking traps that might happen, the way that you're talking to yourself and you're recognizing that words have power at the end of the day, and the way we frame things really affect the way we feel. Teaching you guys ways to calm your body down and to really understand that your mind and your body are connected, that we go into fight and flight and freeze mode when we're anxious, and that our behaviors are also going to be part of that cycle. So be mindful of if we avoid, if we are becoming irritable, if we're just freezing. So I'm just giving you some study tips and some test exam tips that might be useful. So I'm really open to hearing you guys out. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can, see the chat box and maybe hear what your comments are around test anxiety. Thank you guys, by the way, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Daniela. That was really, really helpful. Again, as a student, like I said, I've been through this, and I have exams coming up next year, so I know I will go through this. But now I know, what things I should do or what things I can avoid to make myself much calmer. One thing you mentioned, about talk to yourself like best friend, and that is something that has helped me a lot. I used to get a lot of anxiety. I still do. But I used to get a lot before, and I remember, somebody telling me that you need to talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend, like all the positive things, and implementing that has made such a huge change. So again, thank you so much for sharing all of these things. Guys, if you have any question, please feel free to ask Dr. Daniela. She's been really kind, to take us through everything, and she'll help us out, if any specific questions you have.
Yeah. Remember, all of this is going to be useful in any other anxiety provoking situations, right? If we take into consider the cognitive model, it just really helps us structurally understand, why is it that I'm anxious? We fall into thinking traps all the time, guys. It's so common. We have all of them. Sometimes, I don't know if some of you recognize yourself with some of these thinking traps. It's normal to have multiple thinking traps, but just keeping track of them and understanding that, oh, this is my jumping to conclusions, this is my catastrophizing, this is my labeling. Just knowing that you have a theme, and not every single day you're going to get a new thinking trap. You probably have the same regular ones.
Okay, somebody has asked a question on shortness of breath.
Shortness of breath that is accompanied with anxiety. It is really difficulty in breathing that will lead to a serious bigger issue, or is a simpler issue. So shortness of breath usually happens when we're having an anxious thought, right? And when we're having a shortness of breath, usually our thought is, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy, or something's wrong with me. And then that adds to your shortness of breath, and then it becomes that vicious cycle. So go back to your body. So really here is, I have shortness of breath. So I'm going to force myself to take deep breaths, right? Or I'm going to be drinking something cold, and I'm going to tell myself shortness of breath is just a symptom of anxiety. Anxiety is not long-lived. Anxiety is a short-term emotion. It doesn't last forever. This feeling will pass. Tell yourself this shortness of breath will pass. It's not a big deal. It's one of the symptoms, but I can control this symptom. All right. What else did we say here? I got lost with the question, so hold on. All right. So my first main problem is keep distracting while studying. Yes, guys, it's a big problem for lots of us. So the reason why we keep distracting ourselves is because we feel like, oh, social media is just one like, one Snapchat. Really, this requires a decision, right? Take away those distractions. If you think that the internet is distracting you, print out things. Make it harder for you to distract. Create a system where you're also, like I said, rewarding yourself after you've studied, right? So you're saying, I'm going to treat myself with, I don't know, a meal, social media time, and meditation, whatever it is, but have a goal, right? Do not let these distractions happen, and it really needs to be a decision that you make. And of course, the other thing I want to say is break down your tasks into smaller tasks, right? So if you have a big test, break that content into smaller tasks that are feasible for you to do. Because when you say, I have a biology test next week, that's dreading. That's really, really scary. But what is the biology test about? So break it down and allocate a time for when you're going to review each little bit, so that you're going to feel more prepared for that test, and you're not going to leave things for last minute. So you don't feel like you're going to be procrastinating and you're going to say that you're going to study the day after and the day after and the day after. The type of food that you eat is also really important, guys. So make sure that you're not eating extra fatty foods or extra carbs or extra sweets. Blueberries, raspberries are really good to stimulate the brain before you eat. There's a website that I'm going to recommend called brain.fm, where you can download sound waves that help you concentrate a bit longer. So if you feel like you're the distracting type, brain.fm is a great resource for you to have. But yes, food is going to be important. Hydration is going to be key as well. How many minutes or hours would you suggest as a good break from studies? So like I said, after 45 minutes, you need at least a 5 to 10 minute break. And you do this for 4 rounds. This is called the Pomerello technique, by the way. I didn't talk about that, but you have 4 rounds of 45-minute study breaks, study sessions, sorry. And after the 4th round, you take a longer break of 45 minutes. So it's 45 minutes, 5-minute break, 45 minutes, 5-minute break, 45 minutes, 5-minute break, again, 45 minutes, and then you have a long break after that. So you start realizing that, you know, you study for hours, but I can say for those that study for hours, your type of studying is not the same. So you really need to take those brain breaks. As you age, can you change your mindset? Of course, you can change your mindset at whatever age, guys. It just takes some motivation and some dedication to do so. But the same way we build habits, habits are neural pathways that are just built over time. So with time, it will be harder to unlearn mindsets, but it's not impossible. It is definitely something we can unlearn or just learn new ways of coping. Yes, so there's a big difference between a panic attack and anxiety. Panic attack is where we have these extreme physical symptoms where we really think we're going crazy and where we think that something's wrong with us physically. It's intense shortness of breath, intense sweating. You can't talk. You're feeling lost in space. You're shaking. You really, it's a really almost feels like a life-threatening event. Whereas anxiety, it's the same physical symptoms but with less intensity. Usually people, when they're having a proper panic attack, you actually need to call the ambulance because you don't know if you're having a panic attack, right? So you need to be very careful when someone's having a panic attack. It's really important just to get a medical staff on board because we don't know what it is. Now, a good question to ask someone that's having a panic attack is taking them to a quiet room. That's really important. Do not engage. Do not touch them. That's number one. Do not touch someone that's having a panic attack. Take them to a quiet space and breathe with them and ask them, has this happened to you before? Right? Because if it has, then we know that it is a proper panic attack. But if it hasn't, then we need a medical staff to be there.
Can I just add one more thing on that? Because I've had a few panic attacks myself, so I can tell the difference is quite huge. So if you think that, you know, if you can, you know, comprehend that, oh, am I having a panic attack or not, then you're not having it. Because if you're having it, you lose sensation in your hands, you lose sensation in your legs, everything starts getting dark and you can't breathe, and you really, because you need you know, a medical intervention at that time to really calm you down.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're able to process that, okay, am I having a panic attack, then most likely you're not.
Yeah. So someone else is asking, is it bad to overload my mind with information and overwork myself with studying because I have a big test coming soon? I would say yes. Break that task into smaller bits. Do not overload your mind with information. That's cramming information before a test. I definitely do not recommend that. How to handle an anxiety attack. So I gave some tips here where you'd go to focal breathing, grounding techniques. Again, thinking about the thinking traps that you fall into, and having a regular practice of mindfulness and just relaxation techniques is going to help you. All right, guys. I hope that this was a useful session. I'm very happy to be with you guys tonight, and thank you for taking the space to listen to this. I hope that this recording can be shared with all of you. And really, please reach out. I'm going to send my email over in the chat right now, like I promised. So you can send me questions, you can reach out. Again, Lighthouse Arabia is here to support you guys in anything that you guys want. And we'll talk very soon, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniela, for taking the time and doing this. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And, you know, it's really good that we're taking care of our mental health. I'm really happy.
All right, guys. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for attending. And we'll make sure that, you know, we share the recording with you guys. All right, perfect. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.